So friends, welcome again. Stephen Fetter here from United in Learning, and it is a pleasure to be connecting. We're at week 5, which I think is remarkable. Week 5 of this 6-week series. And I've been having fun talking through this book with you. And I hope you've been reading some of the other articles in the book during the week and not just focusing on the ones that we chose for our time together, because all of them are just lovely. And the opportunity to think about how our faith gets expressed through our music has been great fun for me. I hope it has been for you too. Welcome. Glad you're with us. As we gather, I'm going to bring up my candle as I do every week. And if you have a candle at home, I invite you to light yours as I light mine here. We'll just take a moment to pause and remember why we're here. Give thanks for spring that really is coming in some parts of our country anyway. Today we had a snowstorm here in Aurora, but spring is around the corner and the days are getting longer and Easter is coming, and we are reminded of all the things that we hope for and what it means to hope. So remember what you hope for. What does it mean to live with your eyes on the prize, as our African American friends would say? What does it mean to live in a hope that is grounded and realistic and not just Pollyanna? It sees the world as it is and yet trusts what it shall be. And as we ponder those things, we'll light our candles and invite God to ignite our hopes, to inflame our passions, to show us the way, to be a light in the darkness and warmth when it's cold, on the reminder always that we are not alone. Thanks be to God. Amen. Excuse me. And as we always do also, I invite you to reflect on the land where you're sitting today. Who lived there before you? Who cared for it and was nurtured by it? Think about all the generations of humans and cultures that have found hope in the land where you're sitting. And acknowledge those folks in the chat and the treaties that bind you. I'm back in Aurora today, and so I'm acknowledging the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and the Chippewas, recognized through Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. I'm just going to mute the extra mics here so that we're not distracted by those. No, we'll just take a minute for those to roll in. Culture is complicated, isn't it? So many different peoples, so many different lives and perspectives and facets on the crystal. So many generations who have been nourished and who have nurtured the land where we are now. Thank you. So we had homework again this week. Let me go and pull that up so that we can all see it together. Share that one. So the invitation was to reflect on grace. That was the theme of our time together last week. And you remember Bill Curvin's thoughts on grace and that wonderful story about how he disappointed his parents by going into ministry. And we reflected on the various different ways we find grace in the music that we sing. So as you thought about that after we gathered, where did you find opportunities to witness to grace Or where did you see it and affirm it and nurture it in the hymns that you sang? Nobody has anything to add yet? Oh, there we go. In the bulb, there is a flower. I almost chose that one for today. Written by a grandmother for her grandchildren. I didn't realize that. That's cool, Shelley. Thank you. Linda says our anthem this week was Remember Love. One of our hymns this week, the hymn after the sermon, was Over my head there is music in the air. There must be a God somewhere. Seems somehow on theme for this session. Behold, I make all things new, beginning with you. I see a new heaven. There's a hymn to help you keep your eyes on the prize, eh, Alana? Teach me, God, to wonder, says Catherine. I don't know if we talk about wonder enough in the church. We often talk more about duty than we do about wonder. Come and find the quiet center, says Dorothy. Find the room for hope to enter. Well, that draws us into today's theme, which is hope. Thank you, Dorothy. Be thou my vision. Take my life and let it be. Grace peppers our hymns, right? It's threaded all the way through them because it grounds us. It's why we are. I often think when I'm preaching about how the hymns shape the message or complete it. Now, I often find that the hymn after the sermon is the one that I need to sum up all my wandering thoughts in the sermon. Oh. If you're not a preacher, if you're sitting in the pews, listen especially for that hymn after the sermon, because the preacher has chosen it for a purpose. Thank you. So this week is Palm Sunday. I wanted to share with you a relatively new Palm Sunday hymn. This is by John Bell from Scotland. And I don't know whether you know this hymn or not. It's certainly not one of the traditional Palm Sunday hymns that I grew up with. It's newer than that. I'm just wanting to make sure that you can hear the sound. So let me just share the sound. Yep. So as you listen to this hymn, if it's new, listen to the music as well as the words. Think about how it captures all of the conflicting emotions of Palm Sunday. And since our theme today is hope, think about the hopes that are expressed and the hopes that are dashed by the hymn and by the full story of Palm Sunday. So this hymn was recorded by the music director at my church. It was recorded for our use during one of our pandemic services. So it's sort of quickly recorded in one take. I mean, she's got a lovely voice, but there's not a lot of high production values. But for our little congregation, this was just part of our Palm Sunday worship in, I think, 2021. I commend it to you, and let's listen to Nancy sing it. Where are we? There we go.
I
I'll just let that sit for a minute. Do you know that hymn? Have you used it in your Palm Sunday services? It's a powerful one for me. Oh. Just start by adding a word or phrase into the meeting chat there that struck you as she sang that. Often change the tune, says Shelley. Isn't that interesting? Hard to bring new tunes into church, isn't it? We need somebody who's really confident in the tune if everybody else is going to sing along to a new tune. Garments pave the road to hell. That's a potent phrase, isn't it? It gives me shivers just to read it. True voices now in death to jeers. Truth becomes a suspect guest. Justice and peace lie in your hands. See, I can't imagine Shelley changing the tune because for me, the tune and the words just mesh so remarkably. Um, did you feel like that? That was my second question on the discussion questions here. What do you think? Is this the right tune for these words? Makes it very dramatic. Yeah. So blind with tears through though voiceless now and deaf to jeers. The music is powerful, Ellen. I agree. Oh, like a wheel rolling on, says Beryl. There's a sort of driving force, right? Like it's almost inevitable. It just keeps going. Yeah, it's tough, Shelley, isn't it? We always try to have a mix in my church. We always do the familiar hymns. That's essential. We have to sing from the heart. But music changes too. It would be sad to lose out on some of the new things as well. We will do a mix on Sunday of old ones and new ones. Your musician factor is almost nigh. That's a very diplomatic way of putting it, Susan. I think, every worshiping community needs to find its own path, and that's what we do. So, hope is our theme today. What's hopeful about Palm Sunday or about this hymn? How does this eerie sounding tune and these crunchy words lead you to a sense of hope? Hope of change starts out with excitement and enthusiasm and the hope for change. It's also Passion Sunday. I get a sense of the cost of hope, right? Like hope is not something Pollyanna. Hope costs. It costs Jesus everything. I'm sure he came in on Palm Sunday hoping that the Romans would turn around, and instead he got crucified. I think he was hoping to call them to account, and instead they strung him up on a cross. Hope can meet you in your most desperate hours, says Jan. Hope says the pain is now, but hope springs eternal. Without light, there is no darkness. Without darkness, there is no light, says Susan. I don't know whether any of you are still using the Voices United worship CD. I use it, and I thought the performance suggestions on this hymn were really valuable. This hymn marks the grim ambiguity of the ride and the pain and grief to follow in the coming week. In performance, set a steady rhythmic pace, not too fast, and let the dissonances in the harmony have full weight. Piano will provide the proper percussive effect, four hands if possible to avoid arpeggiating the full chords. A melody instrument on the tune will help anchor the singing, and if organ is used, experiment with varying registrations to reflect the meaning of the different verses. For example, harsh shrill sounds on the second verse to indicate the jeers. Resist the temptation to slow the tempo or to resolve the final chord. The abrupt inconclusiveness is deliberate and is, in relation to the message of the hymn, strangely powerful. I think those are beautiful words. And the worship CD has been a great resource, but that's one of the best I've found in sort of giving some direction to choosing a hymn. Hope has to be grounded in real life, or it doesn't serve us. But I wonder what drove Jesus on that donkey, knowing that this was going to be dangerous and probably fatal, and yet he kept going. That's hope, isn't it? Ren Ito. So Ren Ren wrote this beautiful piece that has us thinking about music and not the words at all. And I thought it was important to include his reflections here in our series because he doesn't give us a hymn to think about. He doesn't give us somebody else's poem to reflect on. This is all about his experience as a musician. So listen to his description of how he understands hope as as a part of his life and as a part of his life as a musician.
Hope is a strange thing.
Oh my goodness, that's
It means
soft.
something outside of ourselves, a future we anticipate that's out of our control, and at the same time is something we have, a way of being that depends on us. The latter seems just as important as the former. We are as preoccupied with having hope as we are with the specifics of what we hope for. Maybe with good reason, given the state of the world today. How, then, do we have hope? It's a question that might sound familiar if you've ever lived with depression. The radical loss of hope calls the very act of hoping, the part that depends on us, into doubt. It's no longer a matter of just finding something new to hope for. We need to relearn how to hope. In a strange way, it's not unlike musical improvisation. I remember the first time I was asked to improvise. Without the assurance of a score to play off of, I felt like the ground beneath me had given way to an abyss. For a time, I thought I needed to wait for some kind of divine inspiration to navigate that terrifying emptiness. With a lack of direction, I no longer knew how to play. Eventually, though, I started to find my way. By immersing myself in a repertoire, I began to understand what went into the music I so loved and wanted to create. It was like learning a language, becoming familiar enough with phrases, cues, and unspoken rules to use them on my own terms. In time, that terrifying lack of direction even began to reveal something else, the infinite potentiality of what could be created within it. It was still terrifying, but losing the assurances I had was precisely what allowed something new to come into being.
Well, I'm sorry if that was hard to hear. It was softer than I was expecting on my computer. I hope you were able to hear that well enough.
Hope.
So let's reflect on that, and then I'm going to take the sharing down and see if I can play with the settings and boost the volume for the next one while you talk. He says, hope names something outside of ourselves, a future we anticipate that's out of control. And at the same time, it's something that we have, a way of being that depends on us. Those are two very different things. And I thought that was a really interesting way to open his piece. And I wondered about kind of teasing apart each one of those. What do you think he means by that? Something outside ourselves, a future we anticipate, but also something we have. Let's see if we can unpack that a little bit in the chat. And as I say, I'm just going to turn the sharing off and see if I can boost the volume on the next slide while you're writing. Thank you, Tammy. Hmm. Arrow was struck by the line. I felt like the ground beneath me had given way to an abyss. Lana, I experienced this directly yesterday as I was called to give pastoral care to a person who was desperately seeking to find hope again. So was that hope, Alana, something that was a future they wanted or something that they had? And what does it mean to have hope? Gail says, I had to learn how to relearn how to hope. Yeah, powerful line, eh? They wanted to find hope for a future. Yep. And I think the hope Jesus had on that donkey was a more distant future than the first next 5 days. Hope is, at least in part, a way of seeing the world, says Catherine. Oh, the person Alana was talking to was in a dark place where they felt everything had been destroyed. It was hard to see any way forward. Yeah. It pulls the legs out from under you, doesn't it? It stops you from being able to do anything. It's paralyzing. And Arla asks, how do you relearn how to hope? I think that's part of what I was talking about with Ren as we carried on with our conversation. Well, maybe some of his ideas will help respond to that, Arla. One of those four-letter words like love, says Beryl. You hope for it, but there's no guarantee love will come. So here's where I started as Ren and I tried to begin to unpack this together. This is so different, and I really wanted to include it in the series because it's a wonderful meditation on making music that has nothing to do with the sort of logic of the lyric. It's all about the music, and that I found really fascinating.
Hmm. Yeah, I didn't realize that others had used hymns as prompts, but I mean, I was asked to write about hope, and in thinking about how hope works, I think conventionally, when we think about hope, we think about it as looking forward to the future. We have an image of what's to come, and we sort of project this image, and that's the image that we hope will become reality. Even now, I continue to think about hope that way a lot of the time. As an adult, I guess, and also when I was younger, having experiences of the opposite of that, of hopelessness, I think, and having that feeling of sort of the rug or even the floor, giving way beneath you, and not having anything left to stand on to hope for. The need to create hope for myself became sort of apparent to me, and that, when I was thinking about it, felt a lot like music, the making of music and improvising. So
I'm starting to think about depression as loss of motivation, inability to pull myself up by my own bootstraps, inability to kind of get out of bed or put one foot in front of another, and just sort of a paralyzing experience where you can't do anything. And and so when you started talking about hope as being the opposite of depression, I started thinking of it not as sort of pie in the sky, rosy future, but rather the ability to roll up my sleeves and get on with it, even when I'm facing something that's not at all rosy.
yeah, yeah. One of the things that happens when you experience depression and people around you are trying to support you, one of the things they will try to encourage you to do is to have hope or be hopeful, which can be hard, obviously, to do because it's not exactly something you have control over. Or the loss of hope isn't exactly something you have control over. And I think, yeah, that the hope that you come to after you've really had an experience of a loss of hope, to me, I think and I mean, this is, I think, different for different people, but for me, it was so different from I think the idea of hope that I had prior to that, because once that sort of received narrative of hope is gone, um, or once it's been shaken sort of at its foundations, you can't just sort of easily come right back to it, or even in time, you can't really come back to exactly the same place. And I think on some level, you realize when you realize that a world without hope is possible, you realize that hope itself is kind of a fragile thing, right? And not just a fragile thing, but something that demands something of you. And I think that's the part that, yeah, rather than being up in the sky, sort of out there in the future, um, you know, something that we're waiting to receive, that there's a core part of hope that is made, I think, or improvised in a sense. And that's not to sort of promote this idea of when we're down, we have to pull ourselves back up right away, or you know, that we have to sort of recover and come back to a position of hope, you know, in a particular way or in a certain time frame. But um, but to say that when we do arrive in a place of hope, it's a place that's as much, I think, of our own creation as it is a response to the world around us and what we want from the world around us. So,
So, in some ways, hope is more than just an emotion, it's almost a decision.
yeah, yeah, I think so.
Thoughtful guy he is, eh? Conventionally, he says we think about hope as looking forward to the future. We have an image of what's to come that we hope will become reality. Do you agree? Is that what hope is? Maybe, based on your experience? I mean, so I think some of you have shared that already. I keep wondering what Jesus was hoping on that donkey. I think he was hoping that the authorities would back down a bit or that people would feel more empowered. Farrell says hope is like a fleeting dream we remember, but it's hard to grasp. Walter's cautioning us not to equate hope just with being upbeat. I think Jesus riding on that donkey and sort of reminding us of the prophecy of the king riding in on a donkey instead of a war horse, that's a hope for a changed nation, right? Hmm. Somebody writes to me privately. I think Jesus was hoping his sacrifice would be worthwhile. Interesting. Hoping that you really could have a ruler who would be more interested in the needs of the people than how pretty his war horse is. An agricultural tool, not a war machine. Yeah. Swords into plowshares, right? Thanks, Beryl. The donkey instead of the war horse. So Ren goes on, when you realize that a world without hope is possible, it's a chilling thought. You realize that hope is a fragile thing and hope demands something of you. And my immediate thought was, especially when you're feeling hopeless, does that just feel overwhelming? Is that daunting, or is that a hopeful insight that hope demands something of you? Maybe you just don't feel like you can. What do you think? Alana says, I wonder if the upbeat kind of hope is a more secular definition that society wants us to believe. Well, we're in the middle of an election, right? It's all about hope. Who are we going to hope in, and whose vision of the country is the one that we're going to put our trust in? That's a secular kind of hope, isn't it? Goes back to your core beliefs about good, says Shelley. Say some more. I'm not sure I'm following you yet. Without hope, well, in depression, says Linda. There is a difference between choosing suicide or life. And Cheryl says it's a false dichotomy. It's both helpful and daunting at the same time. Yeah, you're probably right. Thank you. What makes it less daunting for me, says Tammy, is to stand with like-minded community. Being together in the struggle can build hope. And somebody said earlier, and I didn't read it, that we hope for each other. When somebody else is hopeless, their hope carries us. Uh, Ren and I recorded this about 3 weeks ago, so I think even then, Alana, we had some sense of where the world was going. But yeah, hope is fragile in our world right now, isn't it? Oh, Laurel, I'm not convinced that hope is ever secular. Like grace, hope is outside any transactional framework. And Walter's remembering a series of services for special occasions like a funeral. There was a prayer that said, "We do not know what the future holds, only that the hour for servicing is always present." That seems to me a place of hope. Yes, he wrote these last summer, I'm sure. His conversation with me was only a few weeks ago, but absolutely, these were all of the book was written in June and July. Takes that long to get into publication, right? I'm going to move us along, not because we're done, but because I have more to share before we hit the top of the hour. Well, thank you for your thoughts. Feeling the acceptance and love, says Alana, of another. Say Arla, sorry, Arla, can slowly help one to faith and trust. I love the way you're connecting faith and trust and hope. There are different sides of the same coin, aren't they? Thank you for that. Ren and I, like each of these folks I've interviewed, had a 30-minute conversation, and I'm just pulling out snippets. But here's the next one in the series.
I'm realizing as I listen to you what a control junkie I am. And I think what's frightening for me about improvising is that I hate to appear foolish or incompetent in public. I want to make all my mistakes in private. And so having the notes in front of me is a real security blanket then. But you're talking about something that would draw a different kind of courage out of me.
Right. Yeah, and I think, I mean, because in a certain sense too, I hear what you're saying, and I feel the same way. That's partly why I am a little bit afraid to improvise in public. But coming back to that muscle memory with improvising, it almost is like there is a foundation there of a kind. It's not a set of instructions that tells you how to proceed, but it's a muscle memory or a familiarity, a memory really that grounds you, that you draw on, and that sort of springs up in moments. And it's almost counterintuitive because we're thinking in the moment, we're sort of looking forward in time, thinking I've got to, for example, if I'm playing a piece, I need to know what comes next. And it's counterintuitive to think I'm going to go to what came before, what came long before, what I know how to play. But I think that is really a strong foundation to draw on, and it's not an absolute, because there are going to be gaps that you sort of have to fill in some way that catch you off guard, maybe as you're in this process of musical creation. There is a sense of sort of not knowing what comes next, but there's a strength in the practice, I think, and well practiced musicians, I think, are probably building that memory up, whether they know it or not. So, I mean, I don't know. Someday, if the sheet in front of you were to catch on fire, something might come out.
Yep. I'm I'm just getting the strong sense of this as a powerful metaphor for life. I think our lives really are improvisation, grounded in the cultures that formed us and the practices that we hone. Every day is new, and we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And we have to somehow make daring choices that are brand new
Mhm.
and yet grounded in the identity that formed us.
Yeah.
Say
Yeah.
some more about that.
Um, no, I think you've hit it on the head. I mean, that's exactly how. And I will say I don't always succeed in thinking about it this way, because it is more, at least more conventional, if not more natural, to think about, um, to think about you know having a script for what's to come, or at least trying to predict what's to come. Um, but I think, you know life in general, and also the life of faith, I think specifically, um, demands our presence here now in the moment, and in a moment that is open to so much. There's so much. There's this infinite potentiality that, that could really go in any direction, and the direction it goes in is partly up to us, and depends on that courage to make something in that moment, I think, or to not make something, to choose not to make something. In thinking about life and in thinking about hope in these terms, I think, there's an invitation to really be grounded in what's here, and to build hope out of what's here, and not to think of it as an escape to something else, or to cast this image of something that may or may not be possible. There's so much in the present moment that's inviting us to respond to it. Being aware of that, and being responsive to the present is a really beautiful way to live life, and it's a skill that you kind of have to develop, I think.
Improvising grounded in muscle memory, he says. And well-practiced musicians are building that memory whether they know it or not. Every time you play a piece, you're grounding yourself in that, and then you can riff off what you're grounded in. So if that's a metaphor for life and not just advice to a musician who's tied to their notes the way I am, how does that inform your sense of hope in all the other non-musical aspects of life? How do you practice that? I mean, as a musician, I should practice scales, but what do you do for the other ways of sort of learning how to improvise, hopefully? In the same way that a musician learns from scales, says Alana, we learn from living, being present, learning the results of our actions. I think we learn from stories too. At least I do. The opportunity to experience something through somebody else's eyes that I haven't lived through myself, but it grabs my heart. Walter says, Laurel's right on, re-language. We have words that cannot be reduced to shadows of grace and hope and faith and love. Story and singing help us to hear the new places. The hope takes flesh in our lives and lives, he says. Being grounded can give us the confidence to find hope in life. And perhaps in ministry, says Susan, it's making time for spiritual practices like daily prayer and meditation. The essence of our faith is learning through stories and song, looking for the good in the midst of difficulties. But he says the life of faith demands our presence here, now, in the moment that's open to infinite possibility. It's a skill you have to develop. I think you've already named some of the ways that we develop that skill, but riff on that for a minute. How have you developed that skill? Dorothy says it's okay to be mad at God and tell God so. I love it. Thank you, Dorothy. Right on. Madeline Langle says if God is not big enough to absorb all our doubts and questions and anger, God is no good to us in a crisis. That's my paraphrase, but she's one of my favorite authors. Oh, Laurel's given us a couple of links here. Improvisation Institute and a camp, Improvisation Institute. Thank you. I'll go and look at those after we're done. The idea that we make our decisions and we move forward into the unknown, trusting in our muscle memory is kind of a cool thought for me. Why I keep coming to these Bible studies and keep going to church every Sunday so that when I hit a new situation, I have resources to reach back into to help me make order out of the chaos. Being grateful helps, says Shelley. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof, says Beryl. Sometimes we just have to trust these words. Amazing how often, when we're in the middle of a crisis, we sing a line from a favorite hymn or repeat the 23rd Psalm or something that we've said so frequently that it's in our muscle memory. One last clip from my conversation with Ren.
I don't improvise musically, but I write. I write all the time. And I'm often astonished by what comes out my fingers. I can't believe that I thought that, or I don't know where that came from. I sit down at the keyboard and plow away, and I come back and read it 10 minutes later and thought, wow, well, this has got to be the Spirit because it sure isn't me. And I have a sense that you find the same thing in music that I find in writing there, that there's a presence, a muse, a spirit, a God that speaks through the muscle memory and through the other parts of our bodies that aren't just our sort of frontal cortex.
Yeah, yeah. I have a similar experience with writing as well. I would say actually that writing is the more natural instrument for me than music. Well, there is a way to get ahead of yourself. You can think about what you want to write and or think about the things you want to say and plot them out or sort of conceptualize them before you write them, have an outline. For our conversation today, I actually jotted down a whole bunch of notes thinking about things that I might talk about. And then you're faced with the present moment where I haven't looked at this at all. Or I think with creative writing in particular, where we try to tap into that creativity, there's a real presence to it where and an immediacy where we don't predict and we don't know. And what comes out might be, it could be anything. And it could be something that we feel is valuable. It could be something we decide later, oh, this isn't great. This isn't going to work. Um, but there's a beauty to it regardless, I think. Even in the most thoughtless sort of free writing that you do for I don't know 10 minutes at the start of a day or something like that, like that's a response to a present. Those practices, I guess, of really immersing ourselves in what is from our foundation of what has come, opening ourselves to a future of anything really that could be. I think that practice is so important for us, and it's at the core of our faith. Our faith is all about remembrance. It's centered around the memory of God's deliverance of God's people, and the Exodus story, and also of remembrance of Jesus. And so and that remembering that happens in every time we gather, or in every present, creates something new in that moment. So yeah, so I think that's a faithful way to live, the faithful way to live, I would say.
So Ren and I talked about creativity as an experience of partnership, really, between a practitioner and the spirit, and that the beauty that results from that partnership can't always be predicted ahead of time. Oh, how's that a metaphor for life? Does that does that help you get a different take on hope? What do you think of that? Is that your experience when you're creating something? Maybe you're knitting something, or working in the workshop, or making a meal, or all the different ways in which we create. So did I stump you, or are you just writing an essay? This is the trouble with the online group, right? I can't see what you're saying until you push send. Shelley says sermons often go in a totally different direction than expected when I'm writing, for sure. Tammy says, I think that carries on from the idea of being grounded, creates an openness to experience the movement of the spirit in the process. Sometimes we just need to get out of our own way, says Beryl, and open to God's way. And maybe hope is the conviction or the trust that doing that'll be worth it, or something decent will come out the other end. Jan says, I write devotions, and the best ones write themselves. Funny, I put all the work into planning this series, but we get on the air and I have no idea what I'm going to say. It just comes out. I hope it's useful to you, but that is part of it, isn't it? Grounded in what's gone before, but then open to new insights, new possibilities. Ren's talking about hope as a practice, not a feeling, a choice, not just a motivation. What do you think of that as a way of imagining hope? Beryl's been working on a 6-week study on women in the First Testament. Don't think we followed the script once, but great conversations. There are some wonderful stories in the First Testament, and we don't know the stories of the women very well. Anytime, says Susan, I've said something and afterwards someone has said how profound it was, but my response is those weren't my words. I never thought of them before. Don't know where they came from. Mm. Mm-hmm. Hope is like having a plan B just in case, says Beryl. I wonder if the resurrection was God's plan B. I wonder if that's not what Jesus was hoping for at all, that he was hoping for a change of hearts before the crucifixion was necessary. Sorry, I'm really thinking about Palm Sunday. Can you tell I'm getting ready for my sermon on Sunday? Preacher, you know what I'm doing, right? The whole week focuses on next Sunday's sermon, and then you forget about it and work on the next one. Thank you for an engaging conversation this afternoon. This has been fun. We've hit the top of the hour, and so I know we're not done, and uh, that's just part of it. I hope what we've done is kind of open a new way of thinking rather than close things off. So as you're moving through the week, I couldn't think of a way to tie this to music in church because we weren't really talking about hymns this week. But I thought I'd invite you to think about a variety of choices that you're faced with throughout the week. And as you move through the week, think about the muscle memory that's guiding those choices. Where did you acquire the muscle memory that guides your choices? What kinds of practices informed you so that your habits could be relied on to be consistent with your values? And how are the choices leading you to an outcome you didn't anticipate? Like Susan says, I never thought of where the words came from before. I don't know where they came from. Those aren't my words, but somehow there are profundities that I wasn't expecting. That comes out of our muscle memory, right? So think about not just the music in church, but maybe other choices that you're making. Let's take Ren's comments about improvising hope out of the musical setting and into our lives over the week. See where it leads us. Next week, we're reading Walter Farquharson's piece, Once Comes the Moment. I should have put the page number on there, I'm sorry, but if you've got the book, it's there, and otherwise, go and find it at ChurchX. And delightful to have Walter with us for this session. I always invite the authors to come to these sessions, and most of them are too busy, but gee, it's been fun to have you here, Walter, and looking forward to sharing bits out of the conversation that you and I had when we gather next Tuesday afternoon. Also wanted to invite you, if you've got music from your church services that might fit, I'd be glad to share that. I've shared a few pieces out of my church services, and I can pull one out of my barrel for next week too. But there's a variety of different music. The only rule is that it has to be copyright cleared, both the music and the performance. So it has to be included in the one license database, and you have to have permission of the performers to share it. But if you've got something, let me know. I'd love to share your thoughts as we think about decisive moments in our lives and what we are called to do and to be, and sometimes how the moment comes along when we are called to stand above the fray. Ren was basing his writing today really only on music. Walter is basing his writing really only on lyrics for next week. So interesting contrast. And as we close, Ren didn't give us a prayer. He didn't write a prayer. He invited us to go and read a scripture lesson and improvise. And I thought that's a lovely idea when we're alone, but it's hard to do when we're all online together. So instead, I wanted to share with you a virtual choir piece that comes out of my congregation. We put this together for Maundy Thursday during the pandemic. So you'll see a bunch of us singing, and then you'll see some music that we chose to go along with that service, and maybe that'll set the tone for you as you move towards Palm Sunday and then Holy Week. Dona nobis pacem, grant to us peace, O God. Amen. Blessings for Palm Sunday. And we'll see you next week in the midst of Holy Week. Bye for now.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Pleasure to be with you.
Beautiful.